Our guest today is Fred Dunn. Fred is maybe the foremost expert, or certainly one of the foremost experts on YouTube in the backyard honeybee sort of teaching space, as well as chickens and poultry. He really is just putting an unbelievable amount of expertise out for free on YouTube, on his website, and through, actually, he's been doing it for a long, long time. He's got other video projects that he mentioned here, but Fred knows a lot about it. I took this opportunity to ask him a lot of my questions about bees. My mom keeps bees. She's really good. She knows a lot, and this was fun to talk to another bee person who could kind of help me learn the basics more. As you guys know by now, we really love all of these ancient hobbies and crafts, the things that people have been doing for centuries, and keeping bees and chickens are right up there. So this is The Expert. Very happy to bring you this conversation. With no further ado, Fred Dunn. I don't meet a lot of people who've been putting YouTube content up longer than you have. You kind of started doing this quite a while ago. So as way of background, could you describe not just what led you to start putting content up, but I guess what got you into this sort of, keeping bees and chickens and all that in the first place? Because like I said, you've got quite a collection of videos, and you got to be one of the first, at least in this genre.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I started, I think it's 2008 might be the oldest video. And I think it's pretty funny to go to your favorite YouTube channels and just jump right on, sort videos and go to the oldest video. And you'll see what, like for me, what I looked like when I was 25. But I think the reason I had to create a YouTube channel to begin with was because a friend wanted me to vote on something, and you had to have a YouTube channel to do it. It was some Home
Oh,
Depot related thing. And then, because that was a couple years after I published a video about backyard chickens. Do you know about the video, by the way?
no, not that one in particular, I don't think.
Yes. Oh, it's a heavy category. Lots of competition there in backyard chicken ring. But in 2006, I published a video that took about 7 months in production. So it's called Regarding Chickens, and it came out as a DVD. And so I also did short chicken videos, unlisted or private. And back then, YouTube was really high def, 720 by 480.
Yeah.
When you started out, you could only do about a 15-minute video, I think, max. And that kind of became a thing when you got far enough along that you could put up a longer video and give a
Yeah.
little tutorial. Because my chicken video was 3 hours long, because I knew people needed to know as much about chickens as possible.
Huh.
But I think the first video, the oldest one, is a honeybee video where I lost all my bees one winter. So the winter of 2008, all the beehives blew over. I think I had 8 of them. Came home and they were all laying out in the snow.
Oh,
And yeah, I know. It was bad.
wow.
And so, lesson learned there: strap down your beehives. I live in Northwest Pennsylvania. We're in the area called the Snow Belt. Erie County is north of us, so they're 500 feet above sea level, and we are 1,300 feet above sea level, and we're just a
Yeah.
15-minute drive southeast. So it's like the twilight zone out here. The weather reports don't even mean anything to us here. So I put all the boxes together, put the bees back up, and thank goodness you could order packaged bees through the mail. And I thought, maybe somebody else wants to see this. So I put them, I made a video showing how to install packages of bees,
Hmm.
and didn't know a lot about bees back then. But so the learning curve was pretty steep. I watched programs by Dr. Keith Delaplane, who was the chief entomologist at the University of Georgia. He put together a really great series on keeping bees.
Huh.
So I would say he was like my first influence. But the reason I got into beekeeping to begin with was because of the early documentaries about colony collapse disorder.
Yeah.
So Hackenberg is one of the biggest migratory beekeepers. He's here in the state of Pennsylvania. He's the one that came across all of his bees in their wintering position and had lost bees, like they were just out of the hives altogether. So that led me kind of on a wild bee chase and to learn more about them. And I'm also a photographer. So I contacted Harrisburg, which is the Department of Agriculture for Pennsylvania, and I volunteered photographic services free, just to go and document maybe what's going on with the bees during apiary inspections and things like that. So I would meet the bee inspector at some apiary where the apiary owner would give permission for us to be there. Of course, the inspector goes in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to register beehives, you have to be on the potential inspection list.
Hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to have a real rapid learning curve there. So I
Yeah.
photographed everything from bears tearing apart hives to, not actively, but the aftermath. The hives were all torn apart.
Wow.
American foul brood and how we tested for that. So I did macro photography and things like that. So actually going with that state bee inspector was probably the fastest way to learn about what can go wrong with honeybees. And as a photojournalist, you might say, I want to record the devastation of the look of that beekeeper's face, just how sad he is, right? We're quarantining everything. How do you feel? I didn't do that. So, but that's what I wanted to do. So, and I think the state inspector that I was working with might have got tired of me because he said, if you keep your own bees, you could just do this kind of photography and stuff, right? And right, like on your own property, you wouldn't have to come to these inspections and look over my shoulder and be in the way. And because I even bought a bee suit and everything else just to do photography, and
Wow.
I put holes in the veil to put the macro lens through. And back then, I was a little concerned about being stung by bees. Today, that's not the issue, but back then, so that was the start. And then I started researching bee lines, genetics, and things like that to decide what kind of bees I wanted to keep. So,
Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah,
that's really something. So before we get too far from it,
yeah,
did you have a background, like when you said you made your chicken video? Not a lot of
yeah.
people think of doing something like that. Had you had involvement with producing, I don't know, speculative like video projects, or what?
Uh,
How did you come to that? Idea? Just a hobby gone
well,
too deep, or what?
that's an excellent question. And the reason is kind of what we're doing right here, kind of why we have YouTube right now. I started keeping chickens back in 2000. So, back at the turn of the century, we moved to rural Pennsylvania, and I designed and built my own home here. And my wife and I did that
Oh,
together.
wow.
And yeah, so it kind of ties into your channel a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
And
Our viewers know all about building homes
so,
now.
and of course, the first order of business was we live in the country, we have 8.5 acres, it's time to put livestock on it.
Hmm.
I always wanted chickens, and I read all the chicken books while I was still on active duty in the Navy. In fact, I would use that as a segue to start teaching a class in the Navy. I would say, who grew up with chickens? And after
Wow.
they realized I wasn't kidding, I listened to all the farm boys' chicken stories. And I carried a
Amazing.
chicken book around in my back pocket. It was
Huh.
pretty funny. But so we got chickens from a rare breed hatchery called Murray McMurray, and started on that journey. And the thing that struck me was we don't have a lot of resources for learning about poultry rearing in general. So, especially in the video category. There was a Natural History of the Chicken by PBS. They put out a really nice video, but it kind of just made fun of how quirky chicken people were. Have you seen that? The
No.
documentary I'm talking about?
Uh-uh.
So a lot of real chicken people were extremely offended. Uh, and then there's the poultry fancy. I don't know if you know what that term means.
No. Tell me.
First of all, if we go into livestock, the oldest judged livestock in the United States is what?
Chickens?
Chickens. That's
Really?
right. Yeah, and I love the
Wow.
questioning tone in your voice because that says that you're already benefiting from this conversation.
That's hard to believe
So
somehow. Like, I don't think of a chicken as an animal worth judging too much. Maybe like
that
judge the
is
eggs.
correct. Yeah, and there lies. See, this is how you go down this rabbit hole. Everybody
Yeah.
thinks chickens. You see them in all the Western movies being kicked out of the way of the gunfighters and everything.
Right.
But so when you raise chickens on your own, you get into what kind of chicken do I want to keep, and then you find out there's an American standard for each breed of chicken and how that chicken should look. And it's called the standard of perfection. So
Wow.
I know
Heavy duty.
I'm telling you, this is a whole thing on its own.
Yeah.
But so fast forward, I wanted to pick rare breeds that were conserving breeds. So I also joined the American Livestock Breed Conservancy, which deals with cattle and everything else, heritage breeds. Got into the chicken fancy, exhibited poultry. Then I found out that to exhibit your poultry, you have to have your poultry blood tested. So you need a licensed poultry technician to do that.
Wow.
I know. So, like, the county fairs and things, you see all these chickens on, in competition there, which, by the way, is a very serious thing I found out. And so I contacted all these poultry technicians, and none of them would test my birds.
Huh.
And then it occurred to me that this is a fellowship that has a blockade. In other words, all these high-end exhibitors do not have open doors to junior beekeeper, or not beekeepers, but poultry
Right.
keepers and exhibitors, because this includes waterfowl, it includes chickens, so ducks, geese, everything are included. So I contacted Harrisburg again, and I wanted to become a poultry technician so that I could do this blood testing. And then I offered this blood testing free to anyone 18 years of age and younger so that we could get them into these
Oh, wow.
exhibits, these county exhibits, which made the old guard extremely angry.
Yep.
So, which I had direct communication
Huh.
with some of those people. But anyway, and made really good friends with people in the American Poultry Association's competition group. There is a group of those fancy exhibitors called Hall of Fame American Poultry Association members. They've got the most points of anybody in the United States. They show the best birds. I found out that I actually knew one of those guys without even knowing
Oh,
that he was a Hall of Famer. So then I also brought him in. We did this 3-hour video. So I brought in experts. I didn't want to just make a video about chickens. It was just me, a backyard
yeah.
chicken guy. Being a poultry technician is really about drawing blood, helping people test their birds and things like that. It does not make you a poultry expert. So I had a good fellowship with these experts, and some of my birds won top awards on the county level. I never went to nationals or even state. But it was a very interesting thing. So I put together this video. We had avian influenza going, H5N1, it was called, high path avian influenza. So I contacted again an expert in avian pathology, and it took me probably 7 months of harassment to get her to do a 15-minute spot in my video. But I got
Wow.
everybody. So that's
Wow.
what that video is.
Oh,
So
that's amazing. So you've been in the business
yeah,
of giving away secrets and trade secrets of bees
yeah,
and birds for a long time
yeah.
and casting
That's
them out to the general public.
That's you pretty much nailed it right there.
Huh.
Because once I learn things and I use it as a segue to, I really like giving opportunity to younger people that are trying to get in. But yeah, you're exactly right. Making information available, whether it's birds or bees.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that I quickly ran out of material on chickens. I raised African guineas. We did the growth and development of the Australian emu. We hatched those eggs right here. 51 days in the incubator for an emu egg, in case you're wondering.
Wow.
And fenced a field for them and all of that. So it's just been one thing after another. And my wife is very forgiving and accommodating, of course. So
This is a question I was going to ask later, but I got to ask it now because
yeah,
this kind of, I'll say like a temptation exists in probably every industry, like in the trades, for example. And especially like, I don't know, 100 years ago, guys were not like real excited about sharing trade secrets because the idea was it could take away their own livelihood. And obviously, you know, uh, that expertise is often closely guarded. And
it is.
from my understanding, there was a period of time like with concrete where the recipe sort of concrete actually like left the earth for a while because I don't know if that was like the fire of Alexandria, but where technologies existed and then they did not get passed on, which is something you almost take for granted. Like if our forefathers had something, then we get it by right. Are there, I don't know, cultures or people like who were better at birds and bees like long time ago that maybe even know things we don't know now, or what does the history of these things look like in terms of how well we've received expertise from older civilizations?
Well, you hit on something. This is a very polarizing thing. And I can say that within the poultry fancy, so chickens and the chicken secrets, how to get that bird to look just perfect for a show and things. That's very guarded. These people are as eccentric as those who show dogs, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
The chickens are cheaper, though. That's
Yeah.
the good news.
Yeah.
But it, I've always been a learner. So if I knew an expert, I borderline harass them with my questions and try to use humor, try to let them know that, I just want to know, just want to know.
Hmm.
And chicken people I found to be pretty open once they realize you're serious about it.
Mm.
Although they are directly competing with one another and they do have their insider breeding practices,
Hmm.
which can be very utilitarian. I don't want to be too graphic about it, but they're selecting from hundreds of chicks
Huh.
and they look at them early on in development, a couple days old, and there'll be a pile of dead chicks there. So they're
Wow.
going through them where the backyard chicken keeper will accept all comers and just
Yeah.
happens to celebrate maybe the one or two that look really good. So because we're not managing 1,200 birds, 1,300 birds. For
Yeah.
me, a large collection is 75 chickens.
Okay.
But when it comes to beekeeping, I found them to be. Uh, I have. Let me back up. I have no doubt that there are beekeeping geniuses out there doing a perfect job.
Hmm.
They are not at your bee meeting. They are not on YouTube. They don't want to talk to you. So
Yeah.
this is and some of them that would share their secrets. What we're doing right now is not within their reach.
Yeah.
They don't want to be in the public eye. Beekeeping can be a very private thing. Once again, a lot of I hate to go back to veterans. A lot of veterans are coming back. We have something called Hives for Heroes,
Hmm.
and it gets them into beekeeping. And it's because it doesn't require that you be social with people. So you can learn about bees, you can keep bees, and it's a very rejuvenating thing to do. And there's a lot of health benefit to being in the company of a tiny animal like honeybees
Yeah.
that now we focus on. You get out of yourself a little bit and you're caring for them. So honeybees also appeal to, the antisocial kind of
Yeah.
part of our
Yeah.
culture.
Well, and YouTube and video and all that, like it's just like with craftsmanship. Like if people wanted to be doing YouTube or something, they'd be doing that. They're in their wood shop or their bees because they don't want to be on a call or on the computer. So these things are not natural allies. I get that
Sure.
completely. Like when you are,
Yeah.
especially with bees, like just by nature, like you're in a suit, you're using both hands. It's sticky. You don't want to get it all over your gear. So I understand that completely. That the guys who take it, the folks who take it the most serious, are probably not too interested in plugging up their work area with cameras and people and
Right.
all
Oh,
that. Right.
yeah. And right. And again, the sense of competition, if we're commercial, you are head to head in competition with other producers.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's
So are in Pennsylvania, maybe it's state by state, but does everybody have to have their bees inspected, even like a hobbyist kind of backyard beekeeper?
in the state of Pennsylvania, it is state by state. So each state's Department of Agriculture has their own oversight. In the state of Pennsylvania, it was the Pennsylvania Beekeepers Association. And I want to say this, so I'm glad you asked that question because often people write me and they're like, I don't want the man in my backyard and
Yeah.
I don't need the government telling me what to do.
Yeah.
Well, what really happened is our state beekeepers association got together and wanted an oversight program with the
Huh.
Department of Agriculture because we had early on they had tracheomites, which wiped out over 80% of the bees
Wow.
back when that first hit. And then later we came up with foul brood. So we have American foul brood and we have European foul brood. So it's concerning when we have a bunch of beekeepers out there keeping bees and everything's just, going along and they really don't understand what to look for with some of these diseases. And because they're so pathogenic, these bees fly 3 to 5 miles in every direction. They can interact with other colonies and they can inhabit other colonies through something called bee drift. So diseases can spread.
Mm-hmm.
So we want an inspection program and we want the beekeepers to be registered. And again, that was beekeepers asking for that because if my friend John the farmer, 2 miles down the road has foul brood, we need to be alerted, because now we need to ramp up our vigilance when we're looking for disease and things like that. And of course, they destroy the hives. And that's why a lot of people don't want to do it.
Hmm.
It's kind of the same thing that happened with the poultry. We had avian influenza, and people with fighting chickens had valuable birds. And anytime avian influenza moved into an area, they grabbed their birds, they moved out, which carried the pathogens with them.
Right.
So, see, it's but anyway, you are required, even if you have one colony of bees in my state, to register. Your chances of being inspected are very low.
That's really interesting. Yeah, maybe you knew this, but I'll just for the rest of the conversation. My mom has bees, so I've been around them a little bit, and she's probably got, I don't know, maybe 5 or 8 hives at any given moment, and so would make sense, that these bees are spreading diseases just the way other wildlife and humans do. So yeah, that certainly makes sense. Here's a question for you, and you hit on it, and I can remember in 2005, I think it was when I first heard about this colony collapse, and maybe it had been going on long before that. I don't know. That's when I heard about it, and I remember feeling the same kind of panic, like, oh my gosh, this is holy smokes. And at that time, it was people didn't know if this was like cell phones or something else, and I kind of feel like I never really got an answer on that. I heard, and I got kind of worried and paid attention. And I think around that time, my grandpa was doing bees, so I was feeling like, oh, there's a couple new hives. Yeah. Anyways, whatever came of that, is that still going on? Do we know what it is? Can you wrap that up for me?
Yeah, there's a lot that kicked around. By the way, that cell phone thing got legs and went everywhere, and that was actually from a student doing research who was putting a cell phone inside a beehive on vibrate to see if the bees would react when you called the cell phone. And somehow this blew into cell phones are causing the bees confusion and colony collapse and everything else. That study was very tiny. It was inconclusive, did nothing. Bees didn't care.
But that story ran. Wow.
Oh, and this is our climate, by the way, right now.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody 5G networks, I just get I get those messages every other week. Somebody's convinced. And I always direct people to science. You really have to, not that we need to understand the makings of that high frequency or electromagnetic energy and things like that, but they'll see bees dropping out of the air, things like that. But always go with the science. But colony collapse is almost something that a lot of those in research for Apis mellifera almost wish that hadn't come out, because colony collapse disorder, by definition, was a colony collapse. In other words, it disappeared. You didn't find a pile of dead bees in your hive or a pile of dead bees in front of the hive. They absconded. So they were completely gone. So now we know, but the good news of that was that in those documentaries, and you were alarmed when you heard about colony collapse. So actually putting the term out there was both, kind of a fire that was lit under everybody's rear end on it, but at the same time, we're kind of missing what's going on, because it really ties into the synergistic effect of what's going on with how we're doing agriculture, how we're losing diversity in the environment, how we're eliminating hedgerows, how we're going into monocultural crops. And Hackenberg, as I mentioned before, was the one that first noticed it on a large scale, but he is also one of the things that we look at as a causation for what's going on with the bees, is because we're migrating bees to the almond groves, which is coming up here in the second week of February, by the way. And we have, if you understood the scale of that operation in the almond groves of California, we're in the millions of hives on the move. Wow. Which means that we're also, whatever pathogens and whatever diseases might be present at any of these pollination service sites, they get mixed and moved again, because pathogens can also be passed on the flowers. So from bee to bee, from other bees, they all multiple bees visit the same blossom and things like that. So that's one thing. And then migrating is another thing. And then, of course, habitat change and climate shift is another issue, because now we have dearth where we might not have, much colder in this area where it hadn't been before. And so these weather dynamics are also crunching the bees. And the number one thing on everybody's list is the Varroa destructor mite, which is a parasitic mite that feeds on bees. And everybody, anything to do with mites, everybody tunes right in. And the reason that can be potentially damaging is because the idea that these mites are on my bees and that these mites are destructive to my bees, I'm going to do anything it takes and use any treatment I hear about in the wind on my bees to kill that mite, not understanding the long-term potential impact on the bees. And of course, mite resistance and residue in your comb, contamination of the honey. And so it just goes on and on. But there's no single cause identified for colony collapse disorder. But it has caused us to look at everything collectively.
And it is very much it's happening. The bees are under pressure, but there one thing hasn't surfaced, and that we could point a finger at and say it's this. It's just
that's right. Yeah,
the bees are adjusting to this changing dynamic world.
Right. So instead, we assign weight to different impacts on the bees that could be negative.
I see.
On the flip side of that, we've got all this great research going on with the positive things for the bees. Yeah. So reestablishing, rewilding, and letting percentages of agricultural property go wild so that now we can have natural pollination sources, not just for the bees, but for all the pollinators. Keep in mind, the honeybees are not native. Some people don't even like them. And in some areas, they are impacting native pollinators, so native bees.
Oh, interesting.
So there is a potential negative aspect to a big commercial bee operation in one area impacting adjacent land and the native pollinators there.
I think I understand it, but just in case some viewer missed it, will you just explain a little more, one level more basic about these almond groves? And do I understand it correctly that bees are rented out to do the pollinating and they kind of come and go? So could you explain how that works in agriculture?
Yeah, the pollen grows, and if you Google it or look at any YouTube or any video about pollination of the almonds in the United States, we are by far the largest producer and provider of almonds in the world. Over 80% of the world's almonds come from here in the United States, specifically the state of California. So, and all agriculture reports are available. They're public domain. So you can see, first of all, the millions of acres of almond groves. And then, of course, this is what I'm always interested in. What is not being covered? In other words, how much of the almond crop is attended to by these migratory bees, and how much of it was left without a contract? In other words, without a migratory beekeeper coming in. So what it is, it's an unfulfilled demand. For beekeepers, ballpark, you can get paid $250. And of course, this is published, so you can go and look it up to see what a single colony of bees, and bees are graded, by the way, so you can't put like a package of bees in a box of bees and take them out and get accepted to pollinate almonds. They have to be a full box. They have all these grading levels for it being accepted. But so if you've brought in 4,000 colonies of bees to pollinate almonds and you're getting $240 to $260 per box, the math is substantial. It's huge money.
Yeah.
And that's what really drives that machine. And on the flip side of that, that's why we have so much attention being paid to bees and beekeeping in the Department of Agriculture, because there's all this money assigned to beekeeping. If it was just backyard beekeepers keeping bees and not contributing in an economic way to our U.S. Department of Agriculture, then it would not be, we would not get the attention that we much need and get. So.
Oh, that's really interesting. You might have to scold me about this, but you're the guy to ask. I got a little bit sideways with a neighbor over his bees, and because I was spraying Roundup on my property, and I didn't spray near his beehive because I know enough about bees to know that it couldn't help. But anyways, he explained to me how well, he didn't explain much, but he was really concerned about it. And one thing he did say that I thought was interesting, he said if Roundup gets underneath a beehive, it can kill the grass that's growing, which collects dew that they get, which is how they get water. So could you talk about that a little bit? And I don't,
Well,
you may not be a Roundup expert, but in
I'm
general,
al- I'm
what would
always
you,
alerted.
what would you
Yeah,
add?
my antenna always go up when I'm being asked a question to settle a dispute. But Roundup, keep in mind, Roundup is an herbicide. Roundup makes, of course, systemically loaded pesticide. The Bayer company worked with Roundup to have systemic pesticides built into the corn, for example. But when you're spraying Roundup as an herbicide, there are also fungicides that get sprayed. Remember, those are designed to kill organic material, not animals.
Right.
Uh, and the yeah, I don't want to like call out your neighbor, but if grass didn't exist under the hives, that would do the idea that you're spraying Roundup could migrate to the bottom of his hives, and then the condensation from that kill the grass under the hives.
Yeah.
That's Roundup that's being used well beyond labeling.
Okay. Yeah.
So I used to actually have conversations with people at Monsanto.
Huh.
And a good friend of mine was a chemical engineer at Monsanto Creve Coeur, which is a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. And I grew up knowing them well before I ever did anything with bees. But so people do get alarmed, and there are the science again is out there. What gets damaged when we use different herbicides, even pesticide use? The time of day that it's applied matters.
Yeah.
The time of day that bees forage matter. For example, if you're putting out your herbicides in early morning, the bees start foraging in a meaningful way about noon and later.
Oh.
So these are things that you can work out with neighbors who keep bees, and if you're a crop farmer and things like that, spraying at night even helps too. So
Yeah.
after the bees have
That's
gone in,
really
because
interesting.
they don't navigate after sunset,
Huh.
and they also don't navigate on the cold days. So the low end threshold for bees, if you're under 50 degrees Fahrenheit when you apply it, we have no foragers out.
Huh. Well, that's great. I know that my mom has talked about how her bees, she didn't say half of the time, but a lot of the times, and this might just come from being kind of newer at it, but they'll leave. And actually this neighbor, I got two neighbors with bees, and they both, and we're on good terms, and they both kind of talked about how, yeah, we used to have bees and then they left, or they died and they're gone. And my mom has talked about that, how she says, you know, I don't know, that they just, it's hard to keep them there somehow. And so I think for a beginning beekeeper, that's probably one of the most disappointing parts, is they get set up with bees, they get all this gear, they get a hive, and then it's gone. And I could imagine feeling like you did a bad job or you killed them or one of these things. So how do you talk to like a beginning beekeeper and help them understand, maybe not necessarily what they're doing wrong, but just how bees work, and to what extent stuff like this happens, or is it because of a mismanagement?
Yeah, when new beekeepers get their bees, leaving means a lot of different things. One, bees swarm, generate a new colony of bees, and off they go. Bees that lose their queen, for example, can dwindle away down to nothing without if they don't produce a replacement queen. So things can happen, and when you have just a couple of beehives, that's dramatic. You come home and your bees are gone, or you inspect them, the numbers are way down, and they're not being productive. And usually, this just goes into understanding the biology of the bees and being vigilant about looking in on them. But swarming is what alarms people, and when they leave it, or when they just disappear or dwindle to nothing, usually that's because they have lost their queen. 80% of brand new beekeepers quit within the first 2 years. And it's usually because something like that happens. Their bees disappear and they don't understand why. And they invested in all this infrastructure. Plus, they connect with the bees. They treat them like pets and they take it
Yeah.
personal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's how my mom was. She lost a couple hives and she was crushed. She's a like extreme animal lover, so she gets attached to like, insects all the time. But still, I can imagine that the bees, although they're insects, there is something a little fuzzier about them and a little bit more, um, I don't know. I think we can just respect how hard they work and
Yeah,
build.
people refer to the honeybee as the vegan wasp
Yes.
because they are fuzzy and they're portrayed, they're cute.
Yeah.
Everywhere that you see a honeybee, it's a positive
Yeah.
thing, so.
Have you ever had hives? I know that to some extent they can take on personalities of the queen and such. I've heard. Have you ever had hives where that was really extreme, where that you could tell us about the extent to which that happens?
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head because every bee in that colony comes from that queen. So the queen genetics are
Oh,
key.
somehow I didn't. That never clicked for me, but it makes sense now.
So that's why we're doing this right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the queen, this is why people spend so much money on a queen bee. They bring her in and introduce her to a colony of bees, which may have just been leftover workers from the pollen services through the almond groves. They
Hmm,
often sell off those bees as packages and put queens in them and sell them to people.
hmm.
So they're not related. And so the queen starts laying eggs 21 days after she's laid her egg, which is a great time for chickens because it takes 21 days for a chicken egg to hatch.
There you go.
So uh, after she's begun laying, 21 days later, those are the replacement bees for the colony, and that replacement continues up to 1,500 to, in some cases, up to 2,000 eggs per day.
Whoa.
So that means this is during prime nectar flows and springtime and things like that. That's when they really ramp up their reproduction. And so that means 21 days out, you're hatching out that many new bees every day in that colony, and the colony grows.
Huh.
So the queen is the source of all that. But your question was, I think you're talking about what's referred to as a hot hive,
Yeah.
where you walk out there with your cup of coffee, you're 100 feet away, and you get stung on the forehead for no reason whatsoever. I've not had, and people, by the way, this is for your mom. They take it personal. It's like, what? I wasn't doing anything. I care about my bees, and they just stung me for no reason. So, but what I do is I assist other people, and I did have someone contact me, and they were beekeepers. They had, I don't know, like 20 hives plus, and they brought some bees up from the south, and they had a change of attitude. One colony, and because all their colonies are in a row, one right after another, which a lot of people do, they couldn't tell which one was doing it, but they attacked not only them, they attacked their livestock, their chickens, stung their hogs,
Hmm.
and even in bee suits. Her husband was in a bee suit, and he took 50 plus stings.
Holy
So they
smokes.
couldn't come out of their house. So and so they called me. They didn't know what to do. And I said, "Well, I'll come over if I can video it." So, so if I can exploit your situation,
Sure.
I'll come. So I went over there, and one of her chickens had been attacked by honeybees to the point where only its feet were showing.
Oh my
In other
gosh.
words, it was covered in these bees.
Oh,
The video is on YouTube, so not to promote it,
yeah, we'll
but
link to it.
so what I did was I tested the defensiveness of each colony by just standing directly in front of the landing board and went on down the line. So I told them we kind of had a plan, and I said if they come out and once I find if they get really defensive, you go in your house, I'll deal with them. Did you want me to go ahead and euthanize the colony? And she was very excited that I would even do that for them. Because sometimes that's exactly what you have to do because we have to get those genetics
Yeah.
out of the area. And so there's two ways that these genetics move out. One is, of course, the drones, the male bees that are in that colony can fly out and carry on these defensive genetics. And of course, at the queen, there's another term called usurpation, which means these aggressive queens, which we refer to as Africanized bees, because their genetics are from those bees that we've all read about that came up through our southern border. And what happens is they move in, the queen moves in, they kill the queen that's
Oh.
existing in the colony,
Oh wow.
and they occupy the colony and take it over, and including the brood and the bees, the nurse bees are in there basically defenseless anyway, and they're easy to win over. So it becomes this Africanized colony instantly.
Wow.
So that usurpation practice is very interesting.
What
But yeah,
happens?
that's
How do they
the
get a new queen when they do a usurpation? Do they hatch one and then like train it
no.
to
The
be me?
queen came as a hostile takeover.
Oh, the
The
queen came with
queen
them.
came and they entered that
Oh,
hive
got it.
and attacked the guard bees on the landing board,
Wow.
and of course forced their way in.
Is that what killer bees are? Are Africanized
Yeah,
bees the same as
yeah,
killer bees?
yep.
That was another thing I heard about years ago, and you said it. They kind of came up through the southern border and they're spreading across the country, and that's pretty much it. Is that the case? Is these Africanized bees are just they'll show up from time to time, or
They
what's
can't
going on
handle
there?
the cold. They're focused on our border states. They're in Florida now too. They kind of skip through the middle of the Gulf there because they came by boat. They can't handle the cold. That's
Okay,
why we only have an issue with them when people bring in their bees from out of state,
got
from
it.
the south,
Yeah,
because they
I
just
lived
don't
in
do well.
Arizona, and there was a death on a hiking trail from some bees, and it was pretty jarring. This person just kind of on a hike and terrible.
It's no joke. And usually when something like that happens, though, I'm glad you mentioned the person who died because this can easily get sensationalized.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb for a healthy person who is not allergic is you can handle 10 stings per pound.
Oh, per pound that
So
you weigh, that a person weighs?
that's correct. So it
Oh,
really
geez.
puts it in perspective. You have to be massively stung by bees if you're healthy.
I see.
Now, if you're allergic, one sting can get you,
Yes.
depending on your level of, what your allergy level is.
You said earlier that you're not really worried about stings anymore. Is that something that just from getting stung, you're just not scared of it, or does your body build up some type of tolerance to it?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it ties into a couple things we talked about earlier. One was that some beekeepers are isolated from people. And so early on, when COVID came out, they were like, well, bee stingers don't get COVID. It must be the venom. This is no,
Oh,
beekeepers hate people and they stay away from the local culture. But so, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought there.
no, that's good. Just
So,
about whether I guess you are building some
right.
type of
So, oh,
immunity,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So that's what it is. Why don't often I just wear a veil. I don't wear,
Yeah,
I go in with bare hands and everything. But that really ties in with understanding the disposition of the colony, when to go into it, how to move the bees and frames and things around while you're in there so as not to get them defensive.
I see.
And of course, each colony of bees reading what their temperament is, which can change through the year. So, different times a year, they can become more defensive. If there's a big nectar flow and you smell the honey in the air, you can almost do anything to them at that point. They're all fat and happy and they're not going to defend anything.
Yeah.
So the stock, the type of bees that you're keeping, and then of course what's going on and how you go in there. Because I don't actually get stung very often.
Huh. But it does hurt the same when you get stung as it did like years ago. You just might not be as well.
It's not my favorite feeling.
Yeah, but it's not something like when you're a kid and you get stung for the first time, it's a really big deal because it's never happened before.
Actually, it's very interesting because I have grandsons that are 6 years. Two of them are 6 years old that help me with bees. Both of them stepped on bees this summer and got stung in the foot, and I was astonished by how well they took that.
Interesting. Yeah,
So it really, yeah,
my son got stung when he was probably 4 or 3, and I was more worried than he was. At the time, I remember thinking like I was gone when it happened, and they kind of told me Leo got
yeah,
stung, and I was like,
yeah,
This Leo right here who's playing and doing his thing.
yeah,
I thought I could have thought it would have been worse. I feel like this is like beekeeping mythbusters right now because I'm just like giving you all
yeah.
my questions that have been like sitting in my
Those are
mind for a while.
those are good questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Here's the next one. Over the years, I've seen like I'll say, and I'm sure beekeeping technology and tools does continue to grow and expand, and so there's always people testing new things. And
Hmm.
I've seen a few just recently. The first was a couple years ago, and it was that bee system where you can just turn a crank and it separates the hive. Okay, you got one there.
It's called a flow hive. Yeah,
Could you talk about that? When I saw it, and I
sure.
showed my mom. Her instinct was like, "Oh, that's probably a gimmick. There's no way it could be that easy."
Okay,
We never got any closure on that. So, how's the
I'm
flow
really
hive?
I'm really glad that's a flow hive right there. That's a flow hive straight over my head. That's one behind me. It's one over there.
Oh wow,
Anyway, when that first came out, because you're right, I do a lot of research and development testing, And I also contribute my thoughts and suggestions to a lot of companies that make bee products. So I do help with no return. In other words, I don't ask for any compensation at all for that. But the Flow Hive came out 2015. They did an Indiegogo campaign, and they produced that video that showed honey coming out, holding your
Right.
toast under it, and none of the bees are on the people or anything. And it was a very sensational thing because a lot of people are new to beekeeping because of that innovation, because it made it look like, wow, you just go up to your beehive, they put the honey in it, you
Yeah.
open it and get your jar and fill it
Yeah.
up with honey, and we're done.
Yeah.
So I got on there during their Indiegogo campaign and I ordered one. They're expensive. I
Yeah.
ordered just a super, so that's just the box with the frames that they put their honey in, like $475 for that or something.
Wow.
In the meantime, others that are into beekeeping were just blasting it away, just like,
Yeah.
that's not real, that's garbage, that's a toy. And so some people came out very early with very strong opinions about it. And my point has always been, well, let's get one and let's
Yeah.
put it on a beehive and see what they do. And so what the bees do is everything in that beehive, so all these lower boxes are the same as any other Langstroth style vertical hive configuration. So your brood and your queen and everything is down in this bottom box. So, and then normally we would put honey supers on your beehive. So we would put medium boxes with the frames that are about this tall. Those get capped with, if the honey gets filled, and then they get capped, and then we harvest it. And sometimes you'll see 3, 4, 5 boxes stacked high, especially in the South. And that's all honey. To get that honey out, you have to take those boxes off, smoke out the bees, get them out of those honey supers. And sometimes they use skateboards and things like that are one-way gates for the bees to go through. Pull them all off. Then you have to go to your harvest station and you have to uncap, spin them out, run them through a filter. Then you jar the honey. What this did was, and which is why it's really focused on backyard beekeepers, which is my specific demographic, the people that I'm trying to educate are backyard beekeepers. The Flow Hive eliminated all of that because the bees build their. It'd be cool if I had one of the frames to show you. So anyway, that is a Flow frame.
Wow. Look at that, ready to go.
And there's, right, so if you look, these are hexagonal cells.
Yeah.
And each other leaf shifts and takes that hexagonal cell once the bees have sealed it up, and it takes it from the hexagon, it cracks it open like this, creates a leak path.
Wow.
The honey goes down, you tilt it to the back, honey goes out of a tube right here and straight into the jar with no filtering and no processing. And then you reset it, the cells lock up again, the bees go back in there, and then they seal it up with wax, propolis, whatever they need to do, and they start refilling it again. Each one of those frames produced, for me, a half a gallon of honey. And there's 7 of those frames in a super, and you can also get a 6-frame version. They're really expensive. That was one of the things that continues to be a sore spot for beekeepers. They're just furious. It's out of range financially for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to put it through an extractor. It is fun.
Wow.
To have someone here at my house who's maybe here for another reason, or they wanted to know if they could get a quart of honey or something like that. Just happens to be a day in the 80s, just happens to be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'll say, did you bring a jar?
No way.
Let's go. And that's what they say too. They go, what are you talking about? I said, are you scared of bees? Oh, by the way, are you allergic to bees? Let's go. And so we go out there and I pull off the back of the hive. See, the bees are coming and going from the front.
Yeah.
So that video that they made that everybody was saying was garbage and the bees will be all over you if you did that, turns out to be true.
Wow.
They don't come to the back of the hive. They're coming and going from the front of the hive.
Yeah.
We're doing it during one of those non-defensive times of year when they have plenty of nectar and resources coming and going. So we open up the back and I can show them all the flow frames and we can see that they're capped with wax.
Wow.
And the bees wait until the honey is dehydrated down in what we call finished honey before they put that cap wax on there. And because we have these windows in the back, you see right through this panel
Yeah.
and we'll see that it's finished. And then because they start in the center and they fill it out to the edges. So when
Wow.
we're looking at the end panel, we're seeing the finished product. And then you fill their jar right there, and off they go. And they
Wow.
actually did studies on the honey. University of Queensland in Australia published a study on the flavor of that honey. In other words, as compared to going through normal extraction processes that a lot of commercial operations do. And in Australia, they had beehives that were using the same forage, the same environment. So they made as many of the standards the same as possible. And then they brought in these professional honey taste testers. And they across the board selected flow honey over the traditionally extracted honey because we also introduced smoke over here
Right.
and ran it through a lot of equipment when you processed it, which coming straight from the hive with no smoke because you didn't have to open it, and it went straight from the hive into the jar with no intermediate processing. So that had an impact on flavor, consistency, and what they called mouthfeel of the honey, which was weird to me.
Mouthfeel. Yeah.
But that's what I did my final master beekeeper project on for Cornell. So,
Um, okay, hold on. First of all, so in other words, that flow hive, you think they work great. If you can afford it, go for it. You don't,
they
there's
work,
no,
yeah,
that's
yeah, they
amazing.
work, yeah.
And second, and now tell me, Cornell has a master beekeeper program, or could you explain that? Because
Okay,
I know very little about this, and this is pretty interesting in and of
okay.
itself here.
The very first university in the United States to have a master beekeeper program was Cornell University.
Huh.
And they have a laboratory for honeybee research there in Ithaca, New York, called the Dice Lab, which is named again after an entomologist that studied bees. And that is a master beekeeper program.
Wow.
So you can go to school. University of Florida has a master beekeeping program. And there's something called EAS, which is the Eastern Apiculture Society, which also has a collective where they have a standard for master beekeepers.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, this might be a good spot to wrap up. Could you talk about, like you said, the backyard beekeeper and chickens, but we're on to bees now, but is sort of where
Okay.
you focus your energy. And I know you've got the Way to Bee program, and
Yeah.
how do you advise people start into this, and then what types of tools have you put together to help them? And can you kind of walk through some of that, because as we just learned, you are the master. The
Not the master, but anyway. And by the way, that master beekeeper title thing is really identifying bee experts who are dedicated to educating others
uh-huh.
about bees. So
Okay,
it's not like an arrival that puts you at the top of some,
sure.
beekeeping,
Well,
but
my brother
we're
has
dedicated to
my brother has a
educating.
master's in accounting, so I call him the master. Also, it's just
Yeah.
he
Well,
got it
I
there
did
first.
I did want a sweatshirt that said "Master" huge and just in little tiny letters "Beekeeper."
Yeah, there you
But
go.
anyway, so for the people that are starting to work with bees, one of the ways that the YouTube channels are really helping out is because we can walk you through the beginnings, like what stock you're going to get anyway, but you need to know as much as you possibly can about the bees themselves biologically before you consider getting them, putting them in your yard, or you'll have a lot of frustration potentially. Could even be dangerous, depending on what stock you're getting and how you prepare yourself to deal with your bees. But so we have a series. I answer questions every Friday. The series is up to I don't know if it's 143 episodes every Friday. We answer bee questions, but also on my channel, I talk about hive configurations because there's a lot of choices that frustrate new
Hmm.
beekeepers when they decide to get into it. Do they have to buy that flow hive? I would say don't even touch it.
Hmm.
If you don't know that you like caring for honeybees on your property, don't just get one of those and think, well, I'm just going to get honey out of it. Because then when the honey doesn't come and they don't fill that super, you're
Yeah.
nothing but frustrated and you're dying to show all your friends how successful you are in keeping bees.
Yeah.
So if you have a local program, a local beekeepers association, and usually you can find out through your state Department of Agriculture, or you can do a search for your state's beekeepers association, and then they list all the regional associations. And it's best if you can join one of those or partner up with someone who's as unantisocial as possible. I chased a beekeeper around here for a long time and only got one-liners out of him on his way out of the hardware store day after day.
He
But
does it to be.
so,
He's one of those more private type hermit style
oh,
beekeepers.
I would walk in there and the owner of the hardware store would be like, he's over there. So I'd get my question ready. He would answer one question on his way out the door
And he's gone.
because he was there restocking the honey shelves. But anyway, so you find somebody that's personable and that hopefully keeps bees in a way that you hope to keep bees. Commercial beekeepers are happy to have you come over and help them out, but that can be such a fast-paced uh, way of managing bees and very utilitarian that it may not match up with. Maybe you want to keep, here's where the monkey wrenches come, top bar hives or a horizontal hive or a lay-ins hive. See, now all these different hive configurations come into play. And so sometimes a new beekeeper will invest in some very sophisticated hive configuration only to find out that everything about it's unique and you can't get frames for it, or you don't know how to put bees in it. I've had people buy beehives and write me, "Do the bees just come to it?" Thinking that it's like a beehive like a birdhouse. You put it out there, you build it to spec, and pretty soon birds occupy it. It doesn't, generally happen that way. So learning as much as you can, try to get a local bee association. Like this year, here where I live in Erie County, we have bee courses, beginner beekeeping courses for people to attend. And then I pick up any surplus questions, or if anybody wants to advance a specific direction. I'm what's called a beekeeper at large, and for our bee association, so we can help them out depending on what specifically they'd like to do.
Yeah.
But there's lots of great bee books out there. And again, thanks to YouTube now, where it's different than when I was starting out. You have complete programs here on YouTube. So.
Yeah, well, the fact that people can chime into your show, no, not chime in, just listen in and hear you
Yeah.
talk for a couple hours or however long
Yeah.
about where everything is relevant. And even if it's not the exact question, they're still absorbing the questions they didn't know they should even ask. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's pretty darn cool, because there's not a lot of bee experts just running around, the world. I mean, they're out there, but they're not everywhere. So being able to just like have one just unload like that is
and we
pretty
just
valuable.
had that. We had that Hive Life conference down in Tennessee. I don't know if you heard about it.
No.
What? How
I
did
missed that one.
The largest beekeeper conference in the United States right now just happened down in Tennessee,
Wow.
in Sevierville, Tennessee, and there were 850 attendees. All the big bee equipment manufacturers and marketing people were there. But to tie this in, the thing that was remarkable to me was I was invited just to be there and to talk to people. And so many people came up who watch everything I do, watch every episode. I can't even imagine that, first of all. And I feel sorry for them for having to sit through that. But it's like you said, even if it's not pertinent to what they're doing right now, it's bee knowledge that may be pertinent later or at some time. And that's why I try not to make it redundant. If I'm bringing up information that's been brought up before, it's because there's new research, there's a new piece of kit that goes with that process. So that's kind of how it goes. I almost thought that you heard of me from that conference. I was wondering how you even found out about me in the first place.
Well, to be honest, I have bee videos popping up on my sidebar all the time because, like I said, I've been aware of them because my mom does them, and we actually I did a podcast with her a year ago. In fact, if people are listening, they can hear her. She has a lot of the same comments, like how valuable the local bee association has been for her getting started, and the extent to which sometimes bees, don't get attached because if they leave, some of those kinds of things that she learned early on. Anyways, so I get these bee videos popping up in my sidebar, and I think you popped up in one of those. So I watched a few, but your videos are much, I'll say, not that they're super technical, but they're although the video and the shots are all beautiful and very up close, but you also are giving a lot of real specific knowledge and very that kind of several layers deeper than some of the more sometimes videos will go real viral. I don't know why, but they're maybe kind of basic. In fact, that's what's one thing I wanted to ask. I saw a video recently. It just got posted a few weeks ago with
I
the
know what it
e-bottle
is. Yeah.
system. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually watched your vlog about it also. So I know it's too soon to like get feedback, but it's another
Well,
example of how new things are coming out and people are trying new things. And I kind of put a smile on my face that here we are thousands of years after we domesticated bees and still
yeah.
coming up with
Yeah.
things, so hopefully someday you'll have some type of more experience with that, or maybe you're all ready to chime in. I'll link
Well, it'd
to it
be
so people know.
I spend way too much time answering people's questions, but one of the things I do if I put up a video about anything, if somebody asks a question, I give them a response. Um, the individual that put that up, I had a lot of questions for him, so I put a question on there. He does not respond. He
Oh,
does not give filler information. He does not field your questions. His
yeah.
channel is huge, not as huge, by the way, as your YouTube channel. But he has like 450 some thousand
Well, that's a
subscribers
lot.
and bees in a bottle. I don't know. I don't know what to
Yeah,
tell you.
it's pretty
Because,
interesting for the listeners. This guy has put bees growing in, like, think of like a gigantic 2-liter soda bottle,
well,
something like that.
they're recycled big water fount
Oh,
bottles.
okay.
And so he's found a way to recycle these bottles, use them with bees, and then of course cut them out. But he doesn't show even how he gets the bees out of the honeycomb. There's a
Yeah,
lot of gaps in what's demonstrated. So, and he's in
yeah.
another part of the world where here, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because we could actually touch on it. If your hive configuration doesn't allow you to pull the frames out and look at all the comb, it's an illegal configuration here in the United States because every
Oh,
part of your hive has to be inspectable.
I
And
didn't
he
know that.
does, and he does have near the end of his video a really large, like a 5-gallon plastic jug that he's made that he has wooden frames that do slide in and he can pull them out. So
Yeah.
that would be the only configuration that you would actually be allowed to use here in the US.
Okay, interesting. Well, I love that people are coming up with new tools and systems and testing, and who knows, who knows what the future will bring. It's just these I'll call it like a trade, but these things that have been around for centuries, and here we
Yeah.
are still
Yeah.
learning about them and
Yeah.
still figuring them out. Well, Fred, thanks so much. We'll link to your YouTube channel and a lot of the videos we talked about in particular. Are there any other platforms you're on, or we didn't really even mention your Way to Be Academy, although maybe we did indirectly.
The the way to be academy is probably going to be virtual.
Okay.
The response was too large, and I'd have to cut out too many people.
Well, virtual
So
works. That's
yeah, it's going to
gonna be
have to
neat.
be my own little research center. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that's it. It's thewaytobe.org is also the same website, Fred's Fine Fowl, and YouTube is where I do most of my teaching. All the rest of it's just in person.
That's great. Well, you have an enormous amount of information on your website. Like I said, we barely touch chickens, but there's just as
Yeah,
much or maybe more information on that on there, and maybe we'll have you back on to get into some of those details next time. So thank you so
yeah,
much. We'll link to all these things. Any final words for a beginning beekeeper you would leave? If they made it to this point, they're probably serious about
yeah,
bees. So
yeah. That's a good if they haven't bailed and said boring in the comments. Uh, but no, just learn everything you can and find a person who's like-minded and will take the time to talk to you. I think it's very important to give back. If you've gotten to a higher level in some kind of livestock management, and that's what honeybees are, you owe it to those who are just starting out to spend time with them and help them get started right. That's
yeah,
pretty much
that's
it.
great.
And I want to thank you for having me on too. I was very, very happy to be here.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure,
So
and
yeah.
nice to talk to an expert. And hopefully we'll do it again soon. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks.